In today's state of streaming, movies, box office results, viewership results, numbers have to add up. A show that cost, I want to say, The Acolyte for about $180 million. That's very expensive for a show that wasn't guaranteed to have immediate success or have a guaranteed season 2. So what's going on to all you wonderful people out there, and welcome back to my channel. As you can see from the title, we are talking about the news that dropped last night that Star Wars The Acolyte has been canceled. There will not be a season 2. There will not be a continuation of that particular story. And I'm going to give you the truth, the real reason of why that's happening in today's video. But before we get into that topic, I want to thank you all once again for clicking on the video. If you enjoy this type of content, hit that thumbs up, share your thoughts. I want to hear all your thoughts, good, bad, whether you feel about this decision. Let's talk about it all. But also just share your opinion on if you've seen all 8 episodes of Acolyte. What'd you think about the series? What'd you think about the story? What worked, what didn't work? But also, I want to have a larger conversation in the comments about the current status of the Star Wars brand. Where do you think the brand is overall? Let's talk about that. And consider sticking around by subscribing to the channel and hitting that notification bell. So, first initial impressions, like I mentioned, as I'm pre-recording this last night, Monday, the news dropped from Deadline, as we'll talk about the article here, that The Acolyte has been canceled. They will not be continuing that story. But my initial impressions, I'm not surprised. I say that because in the last decade, look at how reactionary the Star Wars brand has been. Between DC and Star Wars, like it seems like whenever there's negativity, they just completely switch course. So I wasn't surprised when I heard the headlines. And I'm not surprised by the reasons you might be thinking of, as I just think about everything that's transpired over the last 10 years with Star Wars, thinking about all the writers and directors that have been hired and has been fired, from the Josh Tranks of the world to having, the guys that did the Spider-Verse films, and just so many countless other people being brought in, being taken out. Rian Johnson trilogy, where is that going? Taika Waititi's film, what's happening with that? The Daisy Ridley back as Rey, what's going on there? So much uncertainty. There's so much backtracking and retracting things, removing things, changing things. It's just really frustrating to be a Star Wars fan right now. Now, before we get into the Deadline article here and get into the real reasons why this show is canceled, just my thoughts on the show, the series as a whole, The Acolyte. I watched all 8 episodes. I covered the first 3 on my channel, so you could check out my thoughts there. But I thought at the end of the day, the show was mediocre at best. I think Amandla is a wonderful performer, but the whole Osha and May storyline didn't really go anywhere for me. They were like the least interesting thing about the show. I was more interested in Soul and Chimere and everything going on with just how the Jedis were policing the galaxy. Like, that stuff was more interesting to me than what we were getting with that main plot with the whole twins and everything. And it just felt incomplete. And it just didn't really it didn't really have a footing. It didn't really, to me, it didn't know what it wanted to be. And we're going to dive into the fandom of it all. But one of the things about me and how I currently feel about Star Wars as a brand, it's damage control. Like, I don't think Star Wars knows exactly what their identity is, what stories they want to tell. Like, they're doing things for all different type of audience, and I can appreciate that, but it just doesn't have a cohesive type of feeling and tone and aesthetic. It's just all over the place. They don't seem to have a grip on what they're trying to do as a company. And that just kind of gets us into the actual article and the reasoning why this show was canceled for a season 2. So again, as you all can see, this comes from Deadline last night. The Acolyte canceled. No season 2 for the Disney Plus Star Wars series. And let's get into the reasons why. Now, I'm not going to read the entire article, but if you want to, I'm going to leave the link to this article in the description of this video. But I'm going to highlight a couple things. For example, they talk about the news not being too surprising. The Acolyte did okay with critics, with 78% on Rotten Tomatoes, but divided the Star Wars fans, which reflected its overall viewership. And this is where I feel as though this is the reason why it was canceled. It wasn't because of the toxic fandom or, a woke agenda. Acolyte got off to a strong start when it launched back in June, with the 2 episodes generating 4.8 million views in the first day on the streamer, which ranked as the best series premiere on Disney Plus this year, which I'm not going to lie, that there hasn't been that many like flagship shows on Disney Plus besides Echo, and I know like Bad Batch came back, but of course, this is something new, so it generated a lot of interest. But again, the whole like biggest premiere of the year isn't really nothing to praise about. But as I digress, the tally rose to 11.1 million views globally after 5 days of streaming. Again, that's from when it first premiered. But as the data came out, as the Nielsen ratings came out, they talked about how the premiere rose to number 7 on the top 10, which was 488 million views that it was viewed, and it climbed up to number 6 the following week. As the article says, the Acolyte could not sustain the momentum, dropping out of the top 10 in its third week. So we had episodes 1 and 2 broke records for the biggest show of the year premiere on Disney Plus, but then when the rest of the episodes rolled out, leading into the next episode, episode 3, it stayed off from being in the top 10 after release of the finale with 335 million, believed to be the lowest for any Star Wars finale. So when it comes to finales, whether you're House of the Dragon, The Boys, all these week-to-week shows, that's your big moment. That, your premiere is a big number viewership wise in your finale. But according to this article and the ratings, and not necessarily ratings, but the viewership, the finale was some of the lowest that Star Wars has had thus far. And we're talking about The Mandalorian, season 1, 2, and 3, Boba Fett, Obi-Wan Kenobi's show. We had the Ahsoka show, and now this. So that's not good. That means that they lost viewerships week to week. Netflix and Prime and Disney Plus has some high viewership thresholds for renewing high-end, big-budget series that cost well above 100 million per season. So breaking that down, sharing my thoughts on that article, that's the reason why there's no season 2. As I'll talk about the toxicity in the fandom right now, we'll get to that. Sure, that had maybe something to do with it, but at the end of the day, in today's state of streaming, movies, box office results, viewership results, the numbers have to add up. And for a show that costs, I want to say The Acolyte for 8 episodes costs about $180 million. That's very expensive for a show that wasn't guaranteed to have immediate success or have a guaranteed season 2. So to have such high value and price production, it's encouraging for creators out there to know that Disney's not going to short end you when it comes to the budget. But at the same time, you have to know what you're getting into. And unfortunately, and this is just a much larger conversation as far as the streaming wars, and I think those wars are now over, but just how streaming's handled. Like, there's only a finite amount of houses that's going to be able to stream. Like, they're not going to just billions of people are not going to just grow out of trees. You're going to have all this, huge influx of like numbers, and people are going to be just streaming things out of nowhere. Like, no, there's only a certain amount of homes that can, number one, afford these crazy prices. The prices are going up and up and up as streaming goes. And also, there's just so much out there. Disney Plus, Apple TV Plus, Netflix, Amazon. I mean, you name it. There's so many services out there. Some of them are better than others, but it's almost too many options. And with that said, in my humble opinion, as far as the Star Wars being on streaming, we are almost 6 years removed from a Star Wars film being in theaters. And I don't know about y'all, but that's how I was introduced to Star Wars. It was theatrically. It was an event. It was just like not a rare thing, but it was just something that you held near and dear when a new Star Wars movie was coming out. But unfortunately, that's almost the day of the dodos. And it's been 6 years, ladies and gentlemen, since we've seen a Star Wars movie in theaters. And I'll be honest, when 2019 hit and we got the Mandalorian and Grogu, and like that was exciting. Like, oh, we can tell these bigger than life stories, these stories that take place in a far, far galaxy away, and we can tell it in television, and it looked good, it sounded good, it had remnants of the old, original trilogy, and things started off good. But as Mandalorian, I'm a big fan of that show, but as that show has kind of went on, I love season 1, I love season 2, season 3, not so much. I couldn't stand the Boba Fett series. Like that lost the plot so quickly. I did not really care for Obi-Wan. Ahsoka was fine, and here we are with Acolyte. So, listen, I don't want to make this into a review, but I'm just thinking about how I feel about Star Wars. I'm not excited about Star Wars like I used to be. And as someone that's a content creator, I'll say this. I covered the first 3 episodes in the Acolyte, and this kind of talks about the fandom of Star Wars and how I feel about it. For my own mental health, I just don't like to engage with Star Wars fans because I feel like, and this goes for both sides of the fence, whether you're everything's great, there's no flaws in Star Wars, this is the best thing since the last thing they came out with, or the people that thinks that Disney and Star Wars is woke, there's an agenda. I'm talking about both sides of the fandom, as they call themselves, but it's just, there's so much just toxicity on both sides of the fence. Like there's the people again that they don't look at Star Wars having any flaws or any character issues or development issues. They just think that everything's great. The action was great. Well, forget the story, forget the character development. The action's great. And then taking it to the other side of the pond. Oh, this is written by a woman. It's woke. Oh, this has people of color in the leads. Oh, it's woke. Oh, the agenda, this, that, and the third. It's just like, it's so frustrating. It's like, I want to be in the middle. I consider myself a casual Star Wars fan. I've seen all the live action movies. I've seen all the live action shows. I haven't read the books. I haven't read the comic books or watched all the animated stuff like Rebels and, Clone Wars, but I'm a casual fan and I like to stay in the gray. I think that there's great things about Star Wars projects. I think there's some not so good things about Star Wars. I like having those conversations where we can be, fair on the good and the bad, and not to the extreme where everything's the worst. And if you like it, you're a shield, or if everything's bad, you're, a misogynist or a racist. It's just so toxic. And I just don't like to engage with the content because I just feel like there's really no way to engage in that particular fandom. But to kind of wrap up my thoughts, again, I think it all just boils down to, it's just the times we're living in. This show didn't hit the viewership numbers. I feel like when you spend $180 million in a series, your viewership numbers have to just be continuing to grow up. It has to not only be kind of in the social zeitgeist, but it has to bring in new eyes, new viewership. And again, the numbers have to be there. It's unfortunate. It's a different time that we're living in. Like, I feel like an old man. Back in my day, there were some all-time great shows that didn't necessarily have the highest viewership numbers for season one. Like, I think of one of the greatest shows of all time was The Sopranos. I think of The Walking Dead, Game of Thrones, Mad Men, even Breaking Bad. Like, you go back, I'm not saying that the numbers were bad, but when you look at season 2 and 3 and 4 and so on and so forth, they kept growing and growing. And that was a time where, again, if the viewership numbers weren't there, you believed in the writer, you believed in the vision, and you allowed the audience to find a show. That's not the case nowadays. If you're not hitting those, again, cultural numbers, it's not hitting the zeitgeist, and you're not getting viewers higher and higher every single week, they're going to cut the ties with you. And that's the unfortunate situation with Acolyte. It just didn't get those numbers. And when you're having $180 million, whether you love the show or you hate the show or you're somewhere in the middle like me, you need to get the numbers. And unfortunately, that's what it boils down to. The show just does not have the numbers to support continuing this story. So last but not least, just briefly, this is a much larger conversation. The future of Star Wars to me is kind of like 50-50. I'm not saying it's all doom and gloom from here on out. Just because one show's canceled doesn't mean that they're just completely doomed. But we have the new show coming out with the Skeleton Crew, which I'll be honest, it doesn't look like it's for me, but I'll check it out just to see what it's going with. John Watts, some other great talent behind the camera that's bringing the show to life. But I think we need to go back to Star Wars as far as get them back in the theaters, right? We got the Mandalorian and Grogu movie. We have the Dave Filoni universe, a culmination Avengers type of movie. We have potentially the Rey movie. We have the James Mangold taking it all the way back, and Taika still making a movie. But I think we need to focus, or not we, but Disney and Star Wars is to focus on getting their stories on the big screen. And maybe lay off on the shows. Maybe take, you can dilute the brand. There's too much oversaturation. Maybe, you can have your kids show and Rebels and Bad Batches of the World and Tales of the Jedi. But, I know Ahsoka's coming out. I think that's the next big TV show besides the Skeleton Crew is Ahsoka season 2. But after Ahsoka season 2, which will lead up into that big culminating film by Dave Filoni, let's take a break on the shows and just have the movies, have them thought out, have them well written, have them well directed, have a plan, Star Wars. Get back to the drawing board and have a plan. You got Dave Filoni as your Kevin Feige type of, businessman coming up with the creative. You have your Jon Favreau, who's a fan and also has his input on the creative. let Kathy be the great producer she is in producing great products. And hopefully we can all get back on the Millennium Falcon as a fandom. And again, everything doesn't have to be perfect. Everything's not going to be great. Everything's not going to be terrible. Let's just live in the middle and enjoy the Star Wars that I grew up with. And hopefully one day we can get back to that. So let me know your thoughts in the comments, how you feel about the cancellation, how you feel about the brand. What do you think is the future of Star Wars? Let's talk about it all in the comments below. This again, if you like it, thumbs up, share your thoughts in the comments, share this video, and consider sticking around by subscribing to the channel. You're all awesome. Stay safe, and I'll catch you all on the next video.